Welcome to the Silver Screen Project, where we look back at a series of films in anticipation of an exciting new cinema release.
In preparation for the next big Marvel film, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we've gone back to 2015 to watch Ant-Man.
Ant-Man!
The final film of Phase 2 in the MCU, which I always thought was a bit weird, but...
Yeah, they quite often do that, don't they? They stick one on at the end after the big team-up film. It's just,
why? Just make
schedules, maybe. Who knows, really?
What did you think of Ant-Man?
Yeah, I really liked it. I remember at the time thinking it was, it struck the balance of kind of comedy, taking that comedy a little bit further than some of the MCU films. With Paul Rudd, of course, is quite a comedic actor. Quite creative in lots of ways. Basically, felt the same when I watched it a couple of nights ago. I came away thinking it was a fun kind of heist film that did the origin story right and kind of in a more refreshing way than maybe other films. What about yourself?
Yeah, I remember when it came out, I was like, yeah, this is great. Like similar things as you. The comedy, Paul Rudd was very good at, and the heist elements were good. On rewatch, I was like, it's okay. Like I still liked it, but not as much as when it first came out, because it was like, I've probably seen it 4 or 5 times now.
Oh, really? I think this is probably like the third time I've ever seen it.
I think I watched it before the second one, and I've done a Marvel watch for it at some point. Right, I was just like, it's good, but like, it's a bit forgettable in hindsight.
It's very low stakes, which I think is one of the things I kind of liked about it in the first place. But that makes you kind of, it's easy to almost forget it amongst the overall story because it doesn't really fit in. It's not like a world-breaking kind of catastrophe.
I think like it's one of those that on first viewing, I think because the standout bits are like you said, the comedy and the heist are things that work really well on first viewing. But when you know the jokes and you know how the heist is going to work and the outcome, draws you in a bit less.
There was definitely stuff that didn't land as well for me this time. Like the whole like Luis thing where he's doing is it Luis he's called? Yeah. Basically you, isn't it? But he's doing the whole like telling the story and everyone's talking in his voice. Like that didn't really land for me this time.
I remember the first time that was really funny.
Really funny.
Great.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, okay.
There's quite a lot of, I was going to say famously, but not of course most people won't know this. It was Edgar Wright originally doing this film, and he'd written the original script, and it was almost, it was almost filmed.
They filmed some of it.
They'd started filming it, it might be one of your trivias there. And you can really see a couple of moments like that. And there's the bit where the Siri does disintegration by the Cure. I feel like that's an Edgar Wright joke.
Yeah.
And the Thomas the Tank Engine train at the end. All that kind of, there's some kind of very... they feel very Edgar Wright moments there, but they may not be. I have no idea.
Well, I think from what I read, just looking through some trivia, a lot of it is about Edgar Wright, and I think something like 75% of the script stayed the same.
Right. Okay.
Hank Pym's daughter Hope was almost not in Edgar Wright's version at all. I think you might see her once or something.
Okay, so she wouldn't have helped them. Which explains why she doesn't really do much in this film, I suppose.
And there's a couple of extra scenes with Michael Douglas's Ant-Man.
Oh, when he was actually
Ant-Man. But it was Edgar Wright that cast Paul Rudd because he wanted someone who's like naturally charismatic and likable to play this ex-con, which can be quite hard to make likable.
Definitely, and I think a lot of that character stuff works really well. I think Paul Rudd is really good in this. This might be his best appearance in MCU films. I think I can't really remember 2 that well. I know that you've watched it since, because we do an episode on it at some point. And it's just bit parts otherwise, really. Isn't it? So I think his relationship with his daughter, that kind of heart of the story, I think does work quite well still.
So I think that was one of the bits that I kind of enjoyed the most, and that kind of continues into the second one, which we'll talk about next time. Is the relationship between Scott and Cassie, because it seems not only like genuine, but like it's not just a standard father-daughter relationship. They've actually like these seem like real people who've got a real relationship. You're like,
it's not too cliched. Like when the bit that stands out in that, when he gives her the ugly bear, and the mum is like, "Oh, why did you get that?" And then the girl, like, really, the Cassie really likes it.
She's like, "It's so ugly."
Yeah, it's like they really get each other, and you say, that kind of continues in the second one. I mean, in terms of the cast, like I really like most of the cast. I know the crew that are kind of with him, his little convict crew, they don't all really get the stuff to do, and they're kind of, I think they were quite fun, but they're just fairly forgettable. But like Darren Cross, the bad guy who becomes Yellow Jacket, I think he's really good.
He is good.
Is he in House of Cards?
He's House of Cards,
yeah. Because I haven't seen that.
So I think that was kind of in its peak when this came out, and I was like, oh yeah, it's the guy from House of Cards.
Is he quite a similar character? I think
I think if I remember, I obviously haven't rewatched that, but he plays like a lobbyist, so he's he's a bit smarmy, but overall he's kind of a pretty nice guy. So he's a more positive, likable guy in House of Cards.
Because in this he's almost like a Lex Luthor. I know obviously he's a bald businessman, so it's hard to. But you know, he really, like, almost from the start, he's a murderer. Yeah. And I think there's a really funny line when he comes around to the house and they're like, did he see Hope there and that? And she's like, he's gonna kill us. And we're like, what? Like, do they all know that he's a murderer? Like, he's just supposed to be a businessman. Yeah. But obviously we see him with the like goo gun thing at the start, like the miniaturization.
I think that his kind of serious murder stuff and then like the goo gun. Yeah. It's an example of how this film really balances silly and serious quite fun. Yeah. And I think like that's probably shown the most in Scott and Hank's relationship, where Scott is a very silly man and Hank is deadly serious. And that kind of combination is quite fun. And yeah, you see it the same with Cross, where he is quite silly at times and some of the stuff he's doing, but he's a super serious businessman.
Yeah. I think I really like. I think the main cast, like Hope, isn't really in it much, and I wouldn't really even count her as much as the main cast. No. Same with like there's the cop, the new husband of Judy Greer's character. She's called something. She plays the same character as Jurassic World, doesn't she? Just the mum, unfortunately. Yeah, they're all fine, but yeah, the standouts: Scott Lang, Darren Cross, and Hank Pym. And their respective actors that play them. I think they're all really good. I think it's a really solid central cast there.
No, I'd agree.
Yeah, what else did you like?
Yeah, so like all the Scott Lang stuff is fun, and I think the heist where they steal the Ant-Man suit from I was going to call it Michael Douglas from Hank Pym's house. Is really fun. And it kind of shows Scott's intelligence. You've seen him be a bit of a silly character, but like, oh, actually, you can believe this guy's got like a PhD or whatever, like, because he can do this stuff. And I think it's even funnier the fact that like Hank set it all up. like
he was watching them the whole time.
Yeah, like Hank knows what he's doing. And then soon after that, I think that first scene where Scott Lang becomes, where he first shrinks down in the bath.
It looks really good.
It looks great.
It's that kind of macro lens thing that they do, like toy photography and stuff like that, to make things. It's like a funny thing with scale and focus.
And the scale worked great.
It's really good.
I was a bit confused about the architecture of that building, but
and
it worked for the scene.
It's very convenient that there's like a all day club going on, just so we can have that little bit. But yeah, I think that's really cool, and it's fun that then Hank is on the line with him, like talking him through it, and it kind of introduces them straight away, and we get cool bits like him pretending to be the lawyer and the ants. There's a lot of ant stuff in this, and I know that sounds silly, but there's not. Ants. We should watch that. Well, I watched it. Lewis was listening. If anyone hasn't seen it, there's a great little. I think it's literally 15 seconds. With Michael Douglas and Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd. And they just say ants a load of times, and they're doing Hambo and like slapping their chests and stuff. Yeah. Yes, the sequel, I know you've seen it, and obviously we don't want to go into too much. I don't remember there being as much ant stuff in it. Maybe there is, or maybe I'd just forgotten how ant heavy these films are.
This first one has got a lot of ants, because I think it's because Hank Pym does more stuff. And he uses the ants loads.
Because they do the whole bit with the training where it's like, and these ants are like this, and these ants are this. And I'm like, it's like the ant, I guess that it's the ant heist team is kind of what they're doing there, which is quite funny. But I just remember, I came out of it going, there's a lot of ant stuff in this. I remember as well, the bit with like Anthony dying. I remember that in the cinema was quite like emotional. And this time I was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think well, actually one thing worth mentioning is the Falcon scene.
Yes.
So I remember in cinema he just turns up, you're like, what the fuck? And then
I didn't like that originally.
Him being like he's a new Avenger, and then him trying to like kind of
prove himself.
Prove
almost.
himself.
And he's like, don't tell Cap about this.
Yeah. I thought it was quite fun.
I liked it better this time. And I like the intro to it where they're like, oh, it's just the place in New Jersey or whatever that's just like not being used as a disused facility. And then as he goes through the clouds, you can see the Avengers symbol. Like, I think that's quite fun. And yeah, it is a little bit like there's a couple of references where they're like, we should turn this over to the Avengers. And he's like, oh, not like the Starks.
Yeah.
I don't like Stark. And it's like, that felt like a kind of shoved in reference. Whereas the intro I thought was really cool, where it's the de-aged Michael Douglas. And you get Peggy Carter there. You get the guy, is he Hydra? Do we see that in this?
Yes.
Because I think I missed that reference. The guy who gets like punched.
Yeah.
Who's trying to buy the weapon and stuff at the end. But
maybe we don't see it in this.
I think there's a bit where he says Hail Hydra or something. Or maybe it's in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. maybe.
No, he's not in S.H.I.E.L.D.
He's not in S.H.I.E.L.D., is he? No. But yeah, before we get into kind of more negative stuff, I suppose, I've got like, I think the whole final sequence when Yellow Jacket and Ant-Man are fighting, I think that's all really, really solid stuff.
Yeah.
There's some great action. And when it zooms out and you see the little lasers from just like shooting from nothing.
Yeah.
And there's fun bits with scale where like they can pick up the toys because they're so dense. And then they throw it and they're avoiding them. And then when one gets hit, it just bounces off them because they're just little wooden blocks. It's just
when I think it's Yellow Jacket gets hit by Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yeah,
he's like, and it just hits him and falls over.
It's very good. Like it's very clever and it balances like action and comedy together really well. I think that whole and it becomes this kind of horrific thing where he kind of collapses in on himself, Yellow Jacket, and goes like into the quantum realm.
Yeah,
it balances quite a lot of kind of interesting things there. But yeah, anything else before you want to move into more negative stuff?
I think that's I enjoyed the tiny fights and the bits where he goes from like small to big whilst in fights. So jumping around, punching.
Even that effect of the kind of like the frames, that looks really cool and it's quite different to other stuff.
I enjoyed that. Going into the more negative
stuff.
I think Cross is an interesting businessman and stuff. Overall, as it kind of got to the end, I was a bit, I don't really get. I think partly because it's the classic Marvel trope of the bad guy's just an evil version of the good guy.
They do the hand waving thing of like, he's like, my helmet, Hank's like, my helmet contains stuff that stops you from going mad from the chemicals. And even I went a bit mad, and it's like alluding to him being like an alcoholic wife beater in the I don't know if he's an alcoholic, but he's not a good dude.
Yeah.
And then they're like, but Darren, his bald head is gonna get infected by all these things. And then later on they're like, he must have gone mad from particles. And it's like, okay. I mean, the whole time we saw him, he was insane because he kills that dude within like 10 minutes.
I've literally written down particle altering brain chemistry is dumb.
Yes, yeah. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I think the Yellow Jacket design we didn't talk about. I think that's really cool.
It is cool, yeah.
It does fall into the like evil version of the villain thing, which they do a lot.
And I think at the time when this came out as well, we had that a lot in those kind of years leading up to that.
We haven't had that much recently, so I think it felt more like, because he is very different. He can fly. He's got the like almost like Doc Ock Iron Spider.
Yeah, we said the same when we talked about Black Panther. In that, like, I liked the villain in Black Panther.
What name? Oh,
the first
Killmonger.
one, Killmonger. I like Killmonger, but at the end, it was just two guys who are very similar.
They're
fighting
identical
each other,
in that, aren't they?
which was worse than this. But I think it's similar in that, like, it is just like two people who can shrink and get big fighting against each other.
I think the fact that their suits are designed differently and they have those slight Yellow Jacket has a couple extra bits, I think made the difference for me. But yeah, you were saying about negatives, because that was going on to positives.
The only other thing I've got is that I think it's again something you look back in hindsight and can realize is that when you kind of rewatch the film and you kind of think at the end, you're like, it is still just the Marvel formula, isn't it? And it's like, that's not necessarily criticism, because I like all these films. There's not really an MCU film I don't like, but when it's the same formula, I think what it kind of makes you think is like, oh, I like that film, but it's the same as this other film that I like a bit more, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I don't think although
Like, I prefer Iron Man to Ant-Man,
this feels
and it's
very,
kind of a similar plot structure.
Yeah, this feels very Iron Man 1 in that, in multiple ways, but the elongated origin story that takes, maybe a third, maybe even up to halfway before the suit comes out, then a couple of sequences sprinkled through, and then he fights the other version of himself,
who is a close business partner.
yeah. And I think, even like I said, like I wrote down that I really like the final sequence because it's so creative and fun, but it is almost like, right, now we've got to this point. Now there's going to be 25 minutes of CGI action interspersed with them with their helmets off, and I do totally get it. I think because the ones that we've been watching as new releases haven't really fallen quite so much into that. They fall into like almost a new formula that it's been doing. I think this felt quite refreshing to me, but it's not particularly original overall. I don't have masses of negatives to say apart from the kind of just reiterating what you've said, but I think it probably could have had a bit more Ant-Man-y stuff in it.
It's one of those. It's like I struggled to pinpoint kind of actual criticisms, even though kind of at the end I was like, yeah, all right.
I think
it's hard to actually pinpoint why I did it. I wasn't like,
I was pretty positive coming away from it, but I was kind of looking forward to watching this, and I kind of hadn't seen it for a while and stuff. Right. So I think Paul Rudd is pretty good at carrying like mediocre things, and this is more than mediocre. So I think it kind of pushed it up to that.
I've got a couple of bits of trivia.
Yeah, go for it.
One says that 11 minutes into the film, Darren Cross jokes that the concept of shrinking a human sounds like a tale to astonish.
Oh, yes.
Ant-Man made his debut in comic Tales to Astonish, number 27, January 1962. Darren Cross shrinks a chair as part of a demonstration. This was taken from the same comic where it's the first thing Hank Pym shrank was a chair.
Right, okay,
so it's classic Marvel. They do like to hint at the kind
that's
of
when
source
he's
material.
Talking. He does the it zooms in on the little photos of Hank fighting in like the 60s, or the 70s, whenever it's supposed to be. I think those little sequences are fun where you see the little Ant-Man jumping up. And
that
stuff.
Was one of the
was
scenes
that going to be a whole
that Edgar Wright had filmed. Was he was stealing like a microfilm from Panama. And it had like a kind of semi-villain guy that Hank Pym fights.
Right, that would be an opening scene.
As an opening scene. And then kind of, I think maybe in place of the scene we get with Michael Douglas de-aged. It would have just been that and then cut to modern day. That would have been
great,
Apparently it's filmed, so it probably exists somewhere, but we'll
They're
never
so
see
sneaky with stuff like that, though, aren't they?
We would never see it.
That is something people were a little bit upset about, the fact they've skipped over Hank Pym and they've gone straight to the kind of legacy character.
I saw that when they originally were writing it, there was some considerations to go with Hank Pym, but they were concerned about the character's backstory in the comics, with particularly like the abusive husband he was with at Janet, times. Particularly if they wanted to bring Janet in as they did in the second film and beyond as kind of a more
and in
main
this
character.
It's kind of like, it happened in the past because of reasons and stuff. I can't remember what they say in 2, but I'm sure they have addressed their marital issues or whatever in some way, rather than it being like this looming thing, like when's Hank gonna start slapping her, and you're like, oh god.
It's kind of like with the Iron Man films, they made Iron Man a bit of an alcoholic, but not so much that it like ruins his life like in the comics.
They did like, what is it, Demon in a Bottle over like 20 minutes instead of like 20 issues.
Exactly.
It's
literally like it's that one scene at the party where Rhodey takes his suits away and Iron Man 2
and he's like, I'm pissing in my suits. He's like a fun alcoholic. He's not ever like
not demon in a bottle.
because he's dying, because he's got the poisoning. So it's not even like, it's not there's you mentioned, I don't know if this, wait, you say your second trivia in case
okay. The second bit is when promoting Baby Driver, Edgar Wright said he'd never watched the finished film, saying it would kind of be like asking me, do you watch your ex-girlfriend have sex? And I get that, because I saw that apparently
like when I tried to do that, it was terrible.
as in Edgar Wright not wanting to watch it.
Yeah.
I saw that he first pitched the idea of an Ant-Man movie to Marvel in 2003.
Oy.
So it'd been like nearly 10 years he'd been kind of building this up.
Yeah.
To then have it kind of ripped away at the last second because of creative differences.
Yeah.
I understand why he never saw it.
And it would be really weird because it's not even like he filmed all of it. It's someone else's interpretation of his script.
Yeah.
Which would be really like jarring and strange. And
because I think all you could do is think about how it's different, how you would have done this.
Or like
instead of actually enjoying it.
I think because he's very, very tight on editing, Edgar Wright. So if there was an edit that was slightly off, you'd just be like, it would just make your kind of.
And it's not like he wrote like a Batman film and then they made a a separate Batman film. It's literally like mostly his script.
Yeah.
It's like his film that Peyton Reed doing it instead.
Yeah.
And it was like,
very strange. Yeah. But yeah, the other thing I was going to mention is there's a line where Darren Cross catches them in the middle of the heist and he's like, what did you think you were going to do? Stop the future with a heist? And people have come back to that and been like, that's the plot of Avengers Endgame. And it's Scott's leads the plan there. So I don't know if that's an intentional thing or if it's just one of those kind of fan connections on a drawing board.
Well, I doubt they'd had that plan.
No.
Then, but
maybe
it's a fun. It's like when they is it the kid in Iron Man 2 when they're like, yeah, that's Peter Parker. Why not? Why not? Sure.
Cool.
But yeah, so I guess the last thing to do is ask you whether or not this has made you more or less hyped for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, Prod Yes or Prod No?
Yeah, this is a Prod Yes for me. I'm hyped.
I think I'm also going to go Prod Yes, even though I was a bit more critical than I think. I like the Ant-Man character. I'm always happy to see more of Ant-Man.
You did also watch 2 films, not back to back, but you know, maybe a little bit more oversaturated than me.
Well, we'll have to find out when we do the next one.
Better start watching Ant-Man 2. Watch it with me, everybody.
Yes, thank you for listening. We'll be back next time to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then it'll be time to go see Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, because these titles get longer and longer.
I can't wait for the next one after that. But if you want to check out more stuff like this, we've got the Project on all podcast providers. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Little bye.
Bye.
Ants.
Ants. Ants. Ant-Man.